Well, Boston Harbor is filled with a lot of picturesque views and very New England views too, like the pristine waters, the tiny islands scattered all throughout the harbor, some with even quaint lighthouses on them. I mean, check that out. That is gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Yeah, even ferries going back and forth to P-Town. There's the whale watches.
It's busy out there, and there's certainly a lot of things that make the Boston Harbor unique, right? But there's also a new site in town, and it was turning an awful lot of heads earlier today. 3 enormous cranes arriving in Boston this morning. Check it out. Look how tiny those tugboats actually look compared to the cranes right on the bottom of your screen. And while this is an impressive image in itself, you might be wondering, what's all the big fuss about? They're just cranes, right? Well, these cranes are unlike any that you've seen in the Boston Harbor before.
Yeah, they're actually capable of loading and unloading some of the biggest container ships in the world. And they're part of a pretty costly project for the future of Boston. And that's our starting point tonight. The visuals of these cranes really just don't do them justice. So we're going to try to put their size into perspective because this is some serious big ship energy. Soon the cranes will become permanent fixtures of the Port of Boston in South Boston, which is owned and operated by Massport. And there are 3 of these cranes in total, 2 taller ones and 1 shorter one. Now, the shorter one is specifically designed to accommodate the flight ceiling for nearby Logan Airport. The larger ones are currently the tallest low-profile cranes in the world, and they weigh nearly 3,000 tons.
I think they're incredible.
I always come down here because it's nice and quiet, and I was like, whoa, look at this thing come in here, you know, it was amazing.
Would have been fun to see this morning. It's somewhat tough to tell from far away just how big these are. Those guys got a good perspective. So to give you a better sense of the actual height, the taller 2 cranes are actually close to some other well-known Boston landmarks. You see them in the background there, the Tobin Bridge on the left, Bunker Hill Monument on the right. Those are 230 and 250 feet respectively. And these cranes come in at just over 200 feet tall, fairly close to that. So you could imagine, too, with that height and that weight, shipping those bad boys up to Boston was no easy feat. It has been a months-long journey for those cranes. The cranes left China back in April. They traveled very slowly and very carefully, all to get here safely. This is time-lapse video showing at least part of their journey. It took in all 66 days and about 17,000 nautical miles just to get here to Boston.
So why go through all of this effort just to get them here? Well, that's the interesting part because these cranes are actually a part of a major investment to bring Boston's port up to speed. We'll go more into the numbers in just a second, but the goal here is to get Boston's port big ship ready. So what does that mean? That basically means expanding the port of Boston so it can handle larger ships, these ultra large ships. And this is going to be done in 2 different ways. First with these cranes and then with the dredging of Boston Harbor to make the channel deeper and to increase the turning basin so that these larger ships can actually turn into Conley Terminal. And we spoke with Mike Myron, the port director for Massport, all about this.
So we're deepening the harbor from 40 to 47 feet. That's moving into phase 3, which is the final phase, and we're hoping to see that complete next year. And then a new berth for these ships to tie up was completed last year, end of 2020. And then the cranes will really be the icing on the cake, and that will give us the ability to be in the market to handle big ships this fall.
So when it comes to getting big ship ready here in Boston, the city kind of has a long way to go. This big delivery today means we now have some of the largest cranes in the world. But when it comes to ships, we haven't stacked up in quite some time. Things have certainly changed a lot since the USS Constitution first came to town. The Alliance Global Corporate Specialty outlined the largest ships in the entire world in recent decades, too. And things have truly grown exponentially in the last 30 to 40 years. 1984, a ship named the American New York was the largest at the time. These kind of ships are measured in units on top of them called 20-foot equivalents, TEUs. So if you hear us use that term, TEU, or an expert use it, it really just means how many standard containers they could fit on those ships, those huge containers. So the biggest back in 1984, could hold about 4,600 containers. But guess what? That's still what Boston is doing to this day, welcoming ships that only carry about 5,000 containers on board, which would have led the world in the 80s, certainly not today. But the ships have been growing a lot. In 2005, a container ship flying the flag of Denmark was the biggest then. That ship could hold up to 10,000 containers. So way too big for Boston's port unless there were some special circumstances there. Fast forward to now, it's gotten crazy. These ships now can hold more than 22,000 containers. That's more than 4 times the size of ships from the 80s and way too big to fit the Conley Terminal in Boston these days. So it's clear that we've got a ways to go in terms of infrastructure.
So I think these big cranes are going to offer up a couple opportunities. One is that we'll have more capacity. The bigger ships have more space, and that allow us to grow in the Asian market. I think one of the challenges our customers have, no matter where they're shipping, is just finding space on ships. So that's going to be an immediate bump up in capacity. And then I think the other exciting piece is it allows us to connect to markets that exclusively have big ships running in them, like Southeast Asia.
Keep in mind, we're not going to get the super big ships here, the ones that are 22, 24,000 containers on them.
Caught in the Suez Canal.
Not that big. We can get up to 14, which is a big improvement from where we've been.
Yeah, definitely. Considering I was born in 1984, we probably need to up the technology.
Yeah, from that time, sure.
No old jokes. And while connecting with larger markets like those in Southeast Asia might be the ultimate goal, we have a long way to go compared to other ports in this country.
Yeah, you think of us as the hub, right? A port would be high on the list, connecting us to the entire world. But in the list of largest ports in the entire U.S., Boston actually pretty far down on that list. Got some obvious ones on there, right? We rank 20th when it comes to ships and containers coming in and out. You see the top 5 there: L.A., Newark, Long Beach, Savannah, and Houston, all in the top 5. Boston way down the list. We spoke with Willy SHIH, a professor at Harvard Business School, about the evolution of larger ports and why Boston needs to catch up.
A couple years ago, the Panama Canal was widened. So now the Panama Canal can handle ships up to close to 15,000 TEUs. So if you want to have any of that traffic that's coming through the Panama Canal, you need to be able to handle the larger ships. Now, for example, we just saw down in the port of New York and New Jersey, they just raised the Bayonne Bridge so they could handle the larger ships. Norfolk Harbor in Virginia is doing a big dredging project so they can handle the larger ships.
And the New York, New Jersey area isn't wasting time, as you just heard, welcoming these super-sized ships. About a month ago, this big boy called the Marco Polo sailed into the Big Apple, making it the largest cargo ship to ever visit the East Coast. That thing is huge. It spans 1,300 feet, or the length of about 5 Manhattan City blocks. And if you've walked in those blocks, yeah, your feet hurt, so that's big. And Massport says that this will not only make the Conley Terminal more competitive against other East Coast ports, but also it'll make Boston more attractive to new carriers and can open up new trade routes that are only served by these larger ships. So essentially, it's putting Boston on a more global trading map. And it's not just what comes into New England, but it's also what we can export as well. Here's Mike Myron from Massport once again.
I like to think that we don't have any competition. We serve New England. That is our market. There are 2,500 businesses in New England that rely on the Port of Boston to connect to the world. That direct connection is something our customers just absolutely prefer over going to other ports.
And as Willy SHIH also points out, that in order to get a larger global reach, you just kind of have to upgrade.
It's a business opportunity for the state of Massachusetts if we attract more traffic that comes directly to the state. And in order to do that, we have to upgrade to be able to service the equipment that the container shipping lines are using today.
And we mentioned this is a big expense. So how big? Well, Massport is shelling out more than $850 million for the port revitalization project. Oh, big word there, big money. And that will all, of course, be taxpayer money to fund this. And while it sounds like a really hefty price tag, which it is, Massport says the Port of Boston generates about $8 billion for the region every single year. So, a big investment, but a big gain. And it supports that more than 9,000 jobs in the area as well, which means we're not just talking about big ship energy, we're talking about big job energy too. And this couldn't be more crucial than after the pandemic. Of course, as a lot of jobs around the world were cut throughout the pandemic and cities were put into lockdown, shipping really came to a standstill in some places as well. Most recently, a major port in China was shut down because of a COVID outbreak, and 25% of the country's exports had to be rerouted. Willy SHIH at Harvard says that port is slowly reopening, but the impacts on consumers are still being felt.
They're back up to about 70% capacity, but there is an increasing backlog of goods piling up, waiting to get on a ship. It's just messing up shipping schedules everywhere. So if you were trying to get a bicycle, or if you're trying to get furniture, or auto parts or TV sets, things like that, you're going to see further delays.
So when it comes to getting large, big-ticket items into the hub, that's what Massport's director says this port expansion will do, and will do quickly.
I think it's most of what you buy that's imported comes in by ship. So about 90% of global trade, by value moves by ship. So, during the pandemic, it was everything you were buying at home. It was the PPE, sporting equipment when people started working at home, working from home furniture, all of that kind of stuff, the schooling from home, all of the stuff that you buy consumer goods day to day, most of it moves by ship. So, that's the type of stuff that moves by container through the port.
And Tim, just like it took a little while to get these here, this is just basically we're getting the lumber to build the house. Exactly.
66 days just to get it here. It's going to take several more months to get it going. The cranes need to be commissioned before they could actually service some ships. The process does take several months. That includes inspection, some testing as well. That's expected to be done this fall with the hopes of having things really fully operating sometime in 2022. It is a big deal, kind of gets in the weeds a little bit. People saw them this morning, were really geeked about seeing them. But this is a big deal to keep the city on pace with all the other cities on the East Coast, especially in the US.
We were looking at a list and we were down to number 20. And as a native Massachusetts person, I do not like being anywhere not in the top 5 of things.
We'll maybe get up there slowly but surely. All right, let's talk weather here, because if those ships came in the afternoon, they would have needed a lighthouse to see the Boston Harbor.
They certainly would have. It was a mess out there.
Rain was pouring all this afternoon.
Pete, what do you